This is Bill Umansky. I'm a lawyer and the owner of the Umansky Law Firm. Thrown out of 3 schools from a broken home, I felt lost and powerless and without direction. One day, someone gave me a second chance at life. Created this podcast to provide you information to help you find your second chance. Hey, it's Bill Umansky, the Lawman, and today's guest is attorney LeRoy Costner. Hey, LeRoy.
Hey, Bill.
LeRoy, so I'd like to give a little bit of some information about you to our clients and our potential clients. You've got a very, very interesting background, so let's just get right in it, okay? Why did you want to become a lawyer, LeRoy?
You know, it's something that always was in the back of my mind, something that was always kind of there. But frankly, as a kid, I never really thought I could do it. You know, it just wasn't a profession that was I thought obtainable. And
why did you think it wasn't attainable?
You know, it's funny because both of my parents were teachers. I was always taught you can do anything through education. You know, that was how I was taught. But it just somehow or another, it just didn't feel like that was the path for me to take, even though it's what I wanted. So
what path did you take? Did you go, you were not straight to law school or straight to college?
No, I did start out in college. I did 2 years at Mississippi State. And after 2 years, it just wasn't for me. Again, I enjoyed going to college. I did not enjoy going to classes, I guess is what it boiled down to. And it just didn't take. And so,
were you thrown out of school?
No, I wasn't thrown out of school, anything like that. But it just didn't. I came home after my second year, and I went straight through. I did summer school after my first year, did my second year, came home that summer after my second year, and looked at my parents. I'm like, I'm never going back to school. You know, my mom's got a PhD, my dad's got a master's. I think they both cried. Wow.
So they're both very, very smart individuals.
Oh,
their child comes home and says, I'm done with college.
Yeah.
So what did you do?
I did everything. I worked in an auto garage for a while.
What'd you do?
I ran parts, and then I was learning how to build carburetors and learning how to work on that. Didn't really stick with that either. I ended up before high school, before college and high school, I worked in orange groves. So I went back to doing that.
What did you do with the orange groves?
Oh God, I did everything. I plowed fields, and you hoe between the rows. You picked oranges. You just did a little bit of everything.
That's like tough work out in the sun. So tell me,
it's nonstop.
Yeah, what did you learn from that kind of experience? I mean, that's not many lawyers today that worked in orange groves.
It's unbelievably hard work. And you do it. You get up every morning and you go and you try to, you can't sit around and wait. You got to just get right at it, and you just got to go. So, what did a day look like on the orange groves? I'm just trying to understand that for our listeners. I would get up. I lived about an hour from where I lived to the fields that I worked in. And I would get up every morning at about 4 o'clock so that I could be there by 5:30. The sun, usually was coming up in that area around 6. And so I wanted to be there as early as possible, get to work as early as possible, because you didn't want to be working in the noonday sun. So I'd start my day by 6 a.m. And I'd work until about 11. And then you'd take off from about 11 till about 2. And then you'd work from 2 until you couldn't see in front of your face anymore. So
you worked in a auto garage. Before that, you'd worked in the fields, which is just amazing to me. It's such a great story.
Didn't feel great at the time.
I know. How much were you paid? Do you remember?
$4.25 an hour. I made minimum wage to do that. Wow. And I drove an hour to get there.
An hour to get there. So why did you drive there an hour to get to work for $4.25 an hour? I was
living at my parents' house, and so free rent. The groves that I worked in, it was a friend of a friend of a friend who owned them and was able to put in a word for me. Not own them, but worked there also, was able to put in a word. So that was where the job was.
So that's, that's a life lesson itself. You drove an hour in the morning at 5 o'clock to get there at 6 in the morning for a job about $4.25 an hour.
Yeah.
What did you learn from that job?
I learned that I didn't want to work that hard for that little money. It was just determination. You got to get up, you got to do the work, you can't put anything off.
How long did you do it for?
I worked out there for almost a year.
Oh, pretty cool.
Then, then after that, I was able to get a job at Disney, which paid a whole lot less. Or, sorry, Disney paid a whole lot more. It was a whole lot closer, so it just, I went and worked retail. I worked at a cash register out at Disney.
And what did you do after that?
Funny enough, with Disney working a cash register, I met someone there who worked in marketing at Universal Studios. And so I then started working for both, ended up working at Universal. That's where I met my wife in the marketing department there. But when we were going to get married, the marketing in hospitality is not the same as marketing anywhere else. It is a 24/7 business. And so we were both taking time off for our honeymoon, and our supervisor goes, you both can't be gone at the same time for a week. And we're like, here's the deal. We're both going to be gone during that time, and we're only asking for a week. We're not even taking off the time leading up to the wedding, just the week after. And they said no, so we both quit.
Wow. So you're how old at the time that you quit this job at Universal?
25.
Just gotten married, no kids at the time?
No kids, just gotten married.
So what's the next plan for LeRoy?
I went to go work at a bank. Again, friend of a friend was working as a bank teller at a small credit union, and so I went to go there. And I'm sitting there. I'm about 6 months into that job, and I'm looking at the supervisor, and they were transitioning from from teller supervisor to branch manager. And I'm sitting there, and she's a great person, but I'm sitting there thinking, I'm as smart as she is. I can do that job. And so I went to the vice president of the bank that I worked in. I'm like, what does it take to do that job? She goes, you got to have a college degree. Okay. Does it have to be in banking? And she goes, no, mine's in anthropology. It can be, she goes, you need a 4-year degree. So I went back to college. That day I left the bank. I drove to Florida Southern, had a campus here in Orlando, and I left a couple minutes early, drove to Florida Southern, and registered for classes that same day.
Wow. And then did you work while you were in college?
I did. I ended up working 2 full-time jobs while I was going to school at night. I worked for that bank that I was working for, and then I worked for a second bank on weekends.
Wow. So you put in, 60, 70 hours a week?
Oh, at least. And then school on top of that.
That's pretty amazing. So you're thinking at that time about getting into a career in banking?
I was absolutely, that was my focus.
What changed your mind?
Walked into a business law class. It's actually taught by one of the now retired traffic hearing officers from Seminole County. And so I walk in and I sit down, and we are 20 minutes into the first lecture. And all of those childhood dreams of being a lawyer suddenly was like, I'm in college. Why do I have to go for finance? I'm 3 years into my 4-year degree. I don't have to be a banker. I could be a lawyer. I went home that night, told my wife. She just goes, okay. And by the end of the semester, and she saw that I was actually serious, she went out, she bought me books on the LSAT.
You took the LSAT, and then you went to law school right after?
I ended up with almost a year between college and law school just because of money. I needed to save.
Still working at the bank?
I actually left the credit union that I was working for to go work for another credit union because they were going to pay for college. They would end up paying for law school if I'd stayed there. While I just gotten accepted to law school, and the bank went out of business.
Wow.
It ended up getting absorbed by what's now Bank of America.
Did you work in law school?
No, I should have, but I didn't. And that was, I wanted to just for the first time since I left high school, I wanted to just focus on one thing.
So after you, you worked since high school in the fields. You were a bank teller. You worked as a little bit in the auto parts industry, marketing, theme parks. That's just a lot of different experience. And then working, 70, 80 hours a week while you're in college is a tough deal. So probably felt like you probably did well in law school because that's the only thing you could focus on, like you're saying. Is that right?
The first semester of law school was probably my worst because suddenly I had all this free time. Before, when I was an undergrad, if I had 5 minutes, I had a textbook in front of me and I was studying. And then suddenly I was like, you mean I have 24 hours in a day?
Right.
And when I got my grades back the first semester, that was a real wake-up call. And then I had to turn around and suddenly start treating it like the 80-hour workday.
Right.
It's our library opened at 7 a.m. I was there at 7 a.m. They closed at midnight. I was there till midnight.
Did you have any kids in law school or no?
My daughter, my eldest daughter, was born just before I started law school. She was about just under a year old
Wow.
when I started.
So you went to law school with a new wife and new baby. It's pretty tough. What did you do after law school?
I went to go work as a prosecutor down in the Keys.
That sounds like a nice gig. Is it like just hang, or did you actually work for a living?
Oh, I worked.
What did you prosecute down there?
I started out with, possession of undersized lobster, possession of over the bag limit grouper, things that are, coming from Orlando. I'm like, there's a law about that, and so it just, you start there, you start with second degree misdemeanors, and then you just kept working your way up.
So you did a lot of wildlife, fish and wildlife crimes, which you defend people now, right?
I do. And frankly, that knowledge, I'm always surprised when I meet officers up here because so many of the officers that work in the greater Central Florida area, I knew from my days as a prosecutor. It seems like the FWC starts a lot of people down there and then they transfer out.
Wow.
And so I've come across probably dozens of officers that I prosecuted their cases, and now I'm defending their cases.
That's pretty cool. We should do some videos on different fish and wildlife stuff. I may have Jeff talk to you about that. That's something you might be down with doing because you have a lot of knowledge in that area. I know you've helped a lot of people, especially in those fishing cases. So tell us, did you work your way up into felonies?
I did. I started in the Upper Keys office there. There were 4 prosecutors. It's an entirely different world down there than it is anywhere else. Number of cases are different than they are here in Orange and Seminole. But I started in the Upper Keys office, spent 2 years there prosecuting every misdemeanor you can think of under the sun. Then I moved to the Middle Keys, to Marathon. There were only 2 attorneys that were in that office. There was the division chief and there was me. He took all of the cases that had dead bodies. If somebody had died, it was his case. If nobody was dead, it was mine. And at that point, even though on paper I was technically a county court prosecutor, I handled everything under the sun. If there was a crime that occurred anywhere in the Middle Keys, I was the one prosecuting it.
Like, tell us what crimes: robbery, theft, grand theft.
A lot of in the Middle Keys, there were a lot of drug-related charges. That was where most things came from, and then thefts, and specifically like government thefts. People who worked for the government stealing from the government. There was a large number of those.
What kind of drug charges?
The possession of cocaine. We didn't have a big problem with meth, but cocaine, heroin, pills, things like that. Those were really the big drugs there, and it was all coming in, through
the Keys.
Through the Keys.
So, how long did you work as a prosecutor?
I was there for a total of 5 years. My last year I was in Key West, and there it was any felony. on average, the Keys only gets about 2 murders a year. So it's, it's pretty safe as far as that goes. But otherwise, if you can think of it, I mean, I prosecuted some guy for carjacking. At one point in time when my elder daughter was in the 2nd grade, I prosecuted her 2nd grade teacher.
Oh, wow.
Because it's just a small town.
How many trials did you have as a prosecutor? Or how many trials did you work on, or first chaired, second chaired?
As first chair, I have done, as a prosecutor, it was about 75 jury trials. As second chair, almost equal to that amount. We did a lot of non-jury trials in the Keys. People with there's a particular type of crab, and I can't think of what it is, but people harvest them and then sell them. They're used in people's tanks and, things like that. Those were always non-jury trials. We did a lot of that. I was always surprised when, defense attorney would do like a domestic battery as a non-jury trial. But, so we did a few of those, but most everything was a jury trial.
Wow. And so why did you leave the state attorney's office?
My family was up here. My wife's family is over in Brevard County. We had 2 children. Our second daughter was actually born in Key West. And it was time to be back with family. Things were happening in our families, and and we weren't there to be a part of it.
So what did you do right after the state attorney's office?
I actually opened my own practice.
Wow. That takes a lot of guts to do that.
It was much more difficult than I would have ever imagined, in television and movies. And it's just, you graduate from law school and, and here's your paycheck. And it's not that. It is 24/7, which I am good with, but there's so much. And I mean, you obviously know this, there's just so much that goes on with running the business of a law firm that has absolutely nothing to do with being a lawyer.
Yeah, 100%. And it's very, very tough to do everything on your own.
Yeah, and that was just not, I needed help.
Yeah, and we're glad you started helping us out, and you're doing such a great job that we brought you inside the house, which was great. Now you're helping a lot of clients. Let's talk about why you became a defense attorney.
It was important for me to help people. I interned at the state attorney's office in Orange County when I was in law school, and it was just such a massive organization. You'd talk to people and you'd go to other prosecutors and you'd say, here is this case, what should I do? And the response from some prosecutors was, oh, that guy's a dirtbag. You should throw the book at him. Well, how do you know he's a dirtbag? You haven't even read anything. You just know the charge, or I ended up doing 3 trials. And one of the trials that I was told to do, I'm talking with my supervising attorney. I'm like, I don't think this needs to be a trial. Why can't we make a different plea offer?
Right. Well, I mean, you've had hundreds of trials, but at the time that you had 3 trials, you were an intern.
Right.
And so you're saying that was just a situation where, as a young intern, you were put and forced to try a case that you didn't feel comfortable trying.
Yeah. And it was, and I think part of it was everything that I had done in my life leading up to that. I had an entirely different outlook on cases. One of the charges that you can see that has the most direct effect on people is driving on a suspended license charge. It starts out as a 2nd-degree misdemeanor, gets enhanced to a 1st-degree, then becomes a felony. You end up losing your driver's license for 5 years. Most of these come from somebody got a speeding ticket that they couldn't afford to pay. How is taking somebody who can't afford $100 speeding ticket and then giving him a criminal charge with $300 in court costs that he couldn't pay the $100. Now he's got $300 on top of that. Then you go again, and now you're talking about jail time. How does somebody dig out from that? And I think having all of the experiences that I did, spending so much of my life working to make $4.25 an hour, knowing that if I'd gotten those speeding tickets, I would have been in the same boat as that guy. It was an entirely different perspective than somebody who went from high school to college to law school and had never worked a real job in their life.
So tell me, what is your why of being a defense attorney? You could have been any kind of lawyer, family lawyer, bankruptcy lawyer, personal injury lawyer. What's your why for being a criminal defense attorney?
The simple answer is I like helping people. Realistically, I could help somebody as a divorce attorney. I could help somebody with contracts, but going through law school, when I started law school, again, I came at it from an idea of being finance and banking. And I was pointed in that direction. And sitting in my first criminal law class, my professor was Joe DeRocher, who was the elected public defender in Orange County for 20 years. And sitting through that class, and he had a story about everything. He was a fantastic storyteller. I'm not the storyteller that he was, but reading the cases, seeing the stories, or hearing the stories, reading the cases, seeing how it affected everybody's lives, I walked out of that, going, this is what I want, and I ended up taking classes that were not required. Criminal law was required for every first year law student. I ended up going into criminal procedure, then into Florida criminal procedure, and I took every course I could in criminal law. And every time I was going in thinking, maybe this is the class that's going to dissuade me from something, from this. And every extra class I took, I was like, this is it. One of the most fascinating classes that I took was on and white collar crimes. And we spent the entire year talking about banking crimes, which, banking speaks to me. I understand it. And then the crimes, and it brought it all together.
So let me ask you a question. How long have you been practicing law now?
13 years.
So, and how old are you?
I'm 46. I need my kids here to tell me.
So we'll talk about that in a second. So you've been a lawyer for 13 years. You're in your 40s. What keeps you going now? What keeps you refreshed to keep getting up and doing the grind? That's a tough grind that it is. What you have your why. The why is you want to help people, but what keeps you renourished to keep helping people?
It's, and again, it comes back to helping people. I mean, I have cases where you meet with the client and they tell you these stories that sometimes are just too big to believe. And then you start researching the story and you start pulling all the information out from them. You start talking to the witnesses and suddenly that story that was just too big to believe suddenly looks like, no. They were underselling it. And so then you walk into court. Sometimes you can get a prosecutor to listen, but you come into court and you present all of that in front of a jury. And the jury sees what you see. And they walk away, and you get the result for the client.
So we talked a lot about why you became a lawyer and how long you've been a lawyer and what refreshes you. And that's great. Let's turn to your family. So how did you meet your wife again? You said you met her at university. How did you fall in love? How many kids do you have? That kind of thing.
We met working in the marketing department at Universal Studios. At the time, part of the Universal Studios marketing plan was they provided concierge service to all the hotels up and down International Drive. They don't do this anymore. But at the time, that was one of the jobs. And so I was working in one location and my wife, Suzanne, got called in to that location to assist. And when she walked in, I remember, and I was talking to a friend of mine, several days later, I'm like, she's different. I don't know what it is about her, but she's totally different. And I didn't see her again for probably another 4 months.
Wow.
And then we both got selected to work at the Portofino Bay Hotel when that was opening up. And so we're in the meeting for that, and there's 20 people in this room, and as soon as she walks in, I'm like, that's her. That's the person I've been looking for. And I went up, I talked to her. She probably talked more than I did, which is normal. And by the end of that first day, we had a date, and I've never looked back.
And how many kids do you have?
We have 2 kids. We have a now 18-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old daughter.
Wow. How long have you been married?
20 years.
Wow. So you have an 18-year-old and a 12-year-old, both daughters, right?
Both daughters.
Right. Ever want a son?
I always wanted a healthy baby. That was my, I have a brother that's got 4 kids, and I know that he didn't have children until he had the son, but he's got 3 daughters and then a son. And when people are, don't you want more? I'm like, no. Two's a good number. Don't you want a son? I'm like, I just want a healthy baby. My kids are both.
I felt the same way too. So
you got 2 sons. So.
I wish. But I still wish. I think I had a third. I wanted a daughter. I think so. But I think you're blessed to have a family. You've been married together for a long time, and you've got 2 kids. You obviously had a lot of jury trial experience. So, I like to just end this by just asking you, when you have time, obviously you're a family man, but when you have time for what LeRoy wants to do, what are some of your interests? It's
hard to think of interests outside of children, but actually over the last year I've started beekeeping, which is my parents did it off and on for years, which I didn't really know because we were living in the Keys. But last April, I got a beehive, and that's been fascinating to deal with and learn about something entirely different, and it's just way out of my perspectives.
That's pretty neat. Besides, think about like pre-children, like what are some of your interests that you think you may want to rekindle? I think you happen to be a big football fan, if I'm not mistaken.
I am. I grew up going to Florida Gator games. I am a season ticket holder for UCF. I love going to football games. I don't care who's playing. I don't care when or where they're playing. I love going.
Are you in any fantasy football leagues?
No, I've never quite figured out how you take a player from one team and a player from another and the scoring, and I've tried doing that, but it just never I want to see it. Right. I want to see 2 teams, and preferably college football. Those are kids that are out there giving everything they've got, trying to make that next step, and I love watching that. Yeah, I mean, that's 2 diametrically opposed
hobbies, football and beekeeping. So that's actually pretty interesting. Anything else?
Those are... I was trying to think of what I did before kids, and it feels so long ago. We used to go to movies, and now that my children are getting older, when your kids are little, if it's not animated, you don't get to see it, but now that they're older, we can do other, see other things. But it's been just waiting to get to be able to go back to concerts and movies and, be around large groups of people.
Your wife has a great talent. She's a good marketer. She worked for Performing Arts Center. She did some social media for us. Kind of miss her. She was so great at it, actually. That's a little plug if you're listening to your husband's stuff. We want you back. So she did a great job with our social media, actually. She's just so smart, so bright.
She understands people, like the marketing and the interacting with people on a personal level that I've never quite gotten.
Yeah, we all have different skill sets. You go to court, and she can handle the marketing. So, but I mean, I appreciate you coming on the show. Just want to give a little bit of an insight into who you are as a person, as a lawyer. So I welcome you to the show, and we thank you very much. And I'm going to sign off. The Lawman out. Thanks, LeRoy. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Umansky Law Firm podcast. I'm Bill Umansky. If you've got any questions or you just want to reach out and talk, reach us at the Umansky Law Firm on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube, or just give us a call direct, 407-228-3838. I hope you found this information helpful to getting you a second chance. If you like it, please share with your friends. Take care, and until the next episode, the Lawman out.